Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson. We're brought to you by Fantrax, and we are one of the nominees for Best Baseball Podcast of the Year by FSWA. So that's pretty cool.
Nice, congrats.
Oh, well, thanks. That's my guest, Nate Handy. Nate and I are going to be just having a Dynasty episode. We just did a startup Dynasty auction. We'll be talking all about that. But it's a great time to sign up for rotowire.com if you don't already have a subscription for baseball. I also just put up the my top 100 prospects to roster in 2025 fantasy baseball leagues. So great stuff up on the site. That includes recent ADP for all those rookies with some projections mixed in there. So lots of good stuff, lots of reasons to subscribe to RotoWire. But as I mentioned, it's going to be all Dynasty tonight with Nate Handy. Nate and I were in a startup auction that was organized by the great Dan Fu. And it was a Dynasty auction where 15 teams all bought 10 players. We all had $200 to work with. And so Nate, you get invited to be in this startup Dynasty auction. What's going through your head? Where do you sort of start prepping for something like this?
Yeah, this was well, first, thanks for having me, James. It's good to see you. And that was a lot of fun, man. That auction and draft was really the most fun I've had playing fantasy, doing something fantasy in quite a while. I've only actually been a part of one startup draft before. Now I play in many dynasty leagues, but I'm kind of the adopt the dog that obviously has some like DNA problems or whatever and try to make that a champion. That's more of what I've done. So when Dan asked me, I was like, yeah, I would love to do another like startup for real. And then he, started telling me who some of the guys, some of the other owners were. And I was like, yeah, let me test my chops against these guys. So I was pumped. And yeah, different format, right? I've never done one like this before. Have you?
No, absolutely not. I don't think anyone has.
Yeah, but I think if I ever do a startup again, like this is the way to go, in my opinion. But yeah, starting off with the auction, right? 150 players. I wasn't really sure how to tackle this, but I did try to at least have some ideas, James. So what I ended up doing, and I prepped a lot for this. I really nerded out on this whole thing coming into it. I was ready. I don't know if I executed things well, but I hopped on the Fangraphs auction calculator thing, right? I never used that before. And I set up, our settings, and then I made it so it was just like a 10-player league, right? So all the values would reflect. I think I split it up, kind of the ratio of hitters to pitchers that I was thinking I wanted to come away with. I wasn't totally sure how the rest of the league would tackle that. I think it ended up like 5.5 MLB hitters per owner, a little over 3 MLB pitchers per owner, and then like a little over 1 prospect per owner. But I split it up 6 hitters to 4 pitchers. And then, obviously it spit out some values for me. And I thought that was kind of interesting in that I think there was only like 38 hitters that came out with a positive uh, dollar tag on them. And I think like 80 pitchers or something like maybe not quite 80. It was 60 pitchers or something like that. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And I like to zig when others are zagging or zag when they zig, and that's kind of the approach that I wanted to come into this with. I'm not afraid to pay some premiums on some pitching and kind of go that route and see. I mean, for me, James, the history of my fantasy playing days, like tops of drafts, I suck, James. Like things just do not work out. I don't think I have a bad process. It's just the pretty boys always hurt me the most. And I feel like I do pretty well on the back ends. Like, our podcast, we're talking about the margins. We're talking about really fringy guys and the mud. And that's kind of where I feel the most comfortable. So my approach was to try to stick to these values on the hitter side. So I wanted to come away with like 2 of these hitters that had positive values in this calculator that I won't pretend to claim that I totally understand how that calculator works, but I wanted to get like 2 hitters there, and then I wasn't afraid to go and get those pitcher values that I thought was there, knowing that like the league, I wasn't probably going to have competition going for a Zach Wheeler that I think was valued at like $70 in that calculator, but I was like just willing to go high, and I think, and correct me if my logic is wrong here, if you think I'm way off base, James, but I think what that calculator was saying is that the difference between like the top pitchers in the league to like the 40th, 60th ranked pitcher is much greater than that separation on the hitter side. Does that make sense? Did I explain that well? Or that thought well?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Like if you're going pitcher 1 versus pitcher 60 and hitter 1 versus hitter 60.
It's not like a regular auction where you have to complete your whole roster, right? So if you run out of money, you're still getting a top 150 player. Maybe even better when you think about prospects that are going to be taken and what your personal top 100 might look like. Like, I think pretty much the 10 guys that I got were all top 100 players for me. So I don't know. That was kind of my thought going into it. I don't know if you think I'm crazy for that or not, but that's what I was thinking.
So yeah, you were kind of just sort of like almost, how do I leave this auction with the most like 2024 or 2025 value, I should say, almost that you could.
Yeah, I mean, more or less. Um I did allow myself $20 to go after one prospect. I was only going to go after one, just since the advent of MLB.TV and I started watching a lot of minor leagues, the only prospect that I've ever really wanted to be super aggressive on and go for. So I allowed myself $20 to go after Andrew Painter, and that's who I end up getting him for $20. So the rest of it then though, like I don't think you have to attack these things in a total like binary way that it has to be, and I don't know, maybe I'm just too cocky, I don't know, but that it has to be win now or win later. I want to try to do both. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I knew that I was in a dynasty league, and I think my roster reflects it. Yeah, I got some veteran players, some older guys that I think still have some meat on the bone, but I think overall my roster is fairly young.
Well, so I'll lay out who you got in the auction. You got Aaron Judge for 64. You got Garrett Crochet for 45, George Kirby for 21, Zach Wheeler for 20. So that's 3 SP1s right in a row there. Crochet, Kirby, Wheeler for a combined 86. And then, like you said, Andrew Painter for 20, Matt McLain for 16, Chris Sale, another SP1 for 10, Anthony Santander for 3, Stephen Kwan for 1, Xavier Edwards for 0. So like you're obviously it's interesting that you allocated that much towards pitching, but just with the hitters you assembled, Judge, McLain, Santander, Kwan, Edwards, had you kind of thought about some combo of those guys ahead of time, just with the way that the skill sets sort of complement each other there with guys like Edwards and Santander?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Judge was the one hitter that didn't exceed that dollar value that I had spoke about. So I felt good. I would have went to like 68 on him. But you get Judge, that's a stud in a lot of different categories. So I don't know. I felt pretty good about that. Had some freedom, and I knew that I'd be taking 3 or 4 hitters and not spending a lot of money on them, and I was fine with that. Santander, Kwan, Edwards. Did I target them specifically? I had a short list of hitters
Mhm.
that I felt were similar to these 3. Wanted to get 3 of those before I left. I was pretty happy to get Edwards in that. I felt like excuse me, I felt like he was just the most unique, uh, had the most unique utility. And would I put him in a top 150 list just straight up? Probably not. But for my team and this build's needs, like I felt like he was a priority, and I was pretty pumped to get him for $0.
Yeah, I felt like I think it's really hard to, once you kind of get into that sort of, is he a top 150 guy?
Yeah,
It's really just so flat, like from whoever you think is like 100 to whoever you think is like 175. So,
yeah,
a
sure.
lot of these guys, they are a top 150 guy to you if you are relatively high on them. And I agree with you. I've been kind of uh, fascinated by Edwards. Discussed him on some podcasts, just talking about like auction builds, because he is such uh, like a rare combination of statistics that you're getting from him.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I don't know if you saw. I think he said that his goal is to steal 60 bases this year. That would be
I
cool.
I think he could do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah,
I've
when
got
you talk about especially in Roto, when you start building a team and putting a roster together, like you got to throw some of those lists and ranks and adjust, and just like certain players become way more valuable to you than others that, just in a vacuum, you don't really, you
I
might not
mean,
really think of them that way.
Xavier Edwards is going to be leading off for the Marlins, and playing every day, and it's one of the worst lineups in the game. So I just would assume he's just going to have the permanent green light, right?
I would think, I would hope, I'm hoping.
And then you were going to go more on Judge if need be. So obviously a target there. Matt McLain, was he kind of circled for you ahead of time?
I had when I was prepping for this thing, I had just way too many, just different lists of different demographics of players, and McLean was really kind of the last of a certain, I don't know, bucket that I was looking at. I think I had several of the players that you took in kind of the same list, like fairly young MLBers that I like the skill sets. I like the, potential fantasy utility. You gobbled up a few of those guys that were on that kind of list for me, and I wanted to come away with one of those. McLean, I thought the price worked out, and I like his potential as kind of a across the board roto, uh, utility guy. Like maybe not gonna put up, gaudy numbers in a certain category, but across the board, I think could be pretty solid for you. Hopefully, he's healthy.
Yeah, this was, I think a lot of this auction just kind of came down to, um, how badly did two people want a guy?
Yeah, yeah,
Because I think, I think generally, like I was talking about Matt McLain versus Jordan Westberg on my podcast last week with Mark Winokur, and I, we were kind of, it was sort of like a toss up almost, but Westberg in this auction goes for 26 and McLain goes for 16, because there were two people, and I was one of them, trying to get Westberg, and it
yeah,
wasn't as, like, you didn't have a bidding partner that was in it kind of hot and heavy with you on McLain.
yeah, for sure. And especially like, you know, the time of the auction matters very much too, especially if you're doing a format that, no one has really ever played before. Like a Crochet, $45 for Crochet. In retrospect, I would have probably rather to spend that $45 somewhere else. But that was, I think, the second pitcher that was being auctioned, and Ponce and I were going at it, and Crochet still wasn't getting nearly towards that dollar value that I was talking about. So I would just kept going and until I won. But and I'm fine with it. I don't like totally regret it. But if Crochet would have been auctioned off later, that would have been a
Right.
lot better.
Right. Well, yeah. So The way we did this was we used the message board essentially, and we would start a new message thread would be for each player that we were bidding on. And I thought, I mean, you're 100% right about it mattering sort of when guys came out.
Yeah.
I think with Crochet, you and Geoff won him. He's out early. We don't know what the established prices are going to be for.
Right. I think
like
Skeens had just gone for like $55.
right.
Yeah.
But it's not like Logan Gilbert hadn't gone, Scooble, I
Right.
don't think, like, we didn't have a ton to go on.
Yeah.
And so
And I
Crochet got,
won't lie, I was a little bit in the back of my head. I was like, let's see how far these guys will go with some pitchers, and let's see if I can push up the pitcher prices a little bit early. I was aggressive on some pitchers, but I don't know if that tactic did anything for me or not, but that was at least the idea.
yeah, I mean, I was certainly not complaining about like, I definitely wasn't shopping in that price range for any pitchers. So I was happy to see those guys go for that much. But like at the same time, like Jackson Churio goes for 62, Corbin Carroll goes for 61. Those guys got nominated fairly early. But then Julio Rodriguez ends up going for 70, Wyatt Langford for 63, Kyle Tucker for 67. So like to me, like Churio and Carroll, if one of them gets nominated when Julio's getting nominated, basically the last sort of elite power speed outfielder to get nominated, and he goes for 70, like you could easily see a Carroll or Churio go for 75 if they're the last one left. But those guys were getting sold, and there were just still so many guys that hadn't been auctioned yet to sort of dream on. And
Yeah.
I look at those like Churio and Carroll prices to me as really good values compared to what the other top guys went for.
Yeah. Yeah, what's the realty like location, timing, right? Or something.
Yeah,
It's all about
it
that sometimes.
it was totally about timing. And then yeah, like you said, like this was just something none of us had done before.
Yeah.
So, and I was talking about it with Dylan White, who I think was sort of mildly following along, but not that much. And like they give just the values for these guys. To me, they're very useful. I wrote about them. Rotowire.com/pod if you want to check out. I have the full list of the Dynasty auction values from this startup auction and the full snake draft if you want to check it out. But I think these prices, the prices these guys went for, it's really useful to me. And I think you could even argue just the ranking of the prices is as good as like any top 150 you could get out there. But if the same 15 guys do this auction again, the prices are just going to be different because we hadn't done it before.
Yeah.
And like everyone's going to be going in with at least slightly augmented plans compared to what they went in with.
Yeah. And because like mentioned before, because like the worst thing that could happen is you get like a top 100 player. I didn't mind being aggressive early and just kind of seeing how it would all play out. And I wasn't afraid of not having much money at the end, you know.
Well, yeah, I was going to say like the worst thing that could happen is you just don't spend enough money
Yeah, right.
by a lot, right? Like
Right.
and I ended up leaving like a few bucks on the table just because I mean, I think a lot of people ended up sort of the last player, you're leaving a handful of bucks, but you don't want to be kind of sitting there with the hammer and all the real difference making pieces are off the board.
Right. And I
So
don't
did
know
you,
if oh sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, did you have any, like you mentioned Crochet, is that a real regret? Like, do you regret going up to 45 on him? Are there certain players you wish
I
you had
mean
gotten the extra dollar on, anything like that?
I wouldn't say I don't know if it's like necessarily regret. I'm pretty happy with how the team came. I think I gave myself a chance to be competitive. But just like, I mean, I think you do auctions, you can always look back after the fact and be like, all right, if I had $200 to spend with these prices, like, yeah, I could probably make a better list of 10 players than I ended up with. Like, I think Jose Ramirez went for less than Garrett Crochet, and the way that it all turned out for me, I'd much rather Jose Ramirez, especially because I'm kind of weak on the corner infield, than Crochet. But I think if I had to do it again, I think I'd be really curious. I think I'd spend all of my money on 4 players and then fill the rest with $0 players or $1 players. Uh, I just I looked briefly. I didn't like totally study this, but you could have came away that sort of idea. You could have had like Bobby Witt, Jose Ramirez, Rafael Devers, George Kirby. That would have been $199, and then you could have got like a dollar Shota Imanaga, a Taj Bradley, Shane Baz, and Evan Carter, Brenton Doyle, Travis Pizzana type. Like I would have felt fine leaving the auction portion with that lineup there with those 10 players.
Well, do you think you would have had as good of a chance to win the league if you'd done that in year one, I should say?
In year one, I don't know. It's hard to say because I'm not really sure how I would attack the draft. Like for me, if I'm going to be good this year, I think it comes down to I don't know what rounds they were. Like the bats that I kind of had to fill my lineup with. I had a group that young bats that I like that I think are ascending and like Soderstrom and but it was like 5 rounds in a row where I knew I had to like fill my bats there, and I need a couple of those guys to outperform, be better than the 200, range or whatever. So, but I think anytime you do a draft, you have certain pockets in certain areas where like you gotta do better than what you paid for, otherwise you're not gonna be the champ. I don't know.
So, yeah, there was a team that did kind of go that way. One team bought Bobby Witt and Ellie de la Cruz each for
Yeah.
100. They jumped up both bids. I want to say over $20 jump bids up to 100 for both guys. So it wasn't a kind of an organic bid up to 100. I don't know exactly where the bidding would have stopped if it had been that way, but this team clearly went in. They initially tried to get Ohtani and Witt for 100 apiece. Then Ohtani ends up getting bid up to 106. Ohtani was the most expensive player to go, but they go 100 each on Witt and Ellie. I doubt Ellie gets up to 100 if they don't jump bid him. I think like Gunnar Henderson went in the mid 70s. But regardless, Witt, Ellie, and then 8 $0 players: Sonny Gray, Raisel Iglesias, Tanner Scott, Cody Bellinger, Kumar Rocker, Colt Keith, Taj Bradley, Evan Carter. So that's a handful of the players you mentioned. So that's one way to go at it.
And
I don't know.
I'm curious to see how it goes for those guys. I I shared with you, but I put together that little tool. Just I was inputting steamer projections as we were going, just to not they weren't gospel to me or anything like that, but just trying to make sure I wasn't getting too out of bounds in some areas, stuff like that. And those guys ended up, I mean, just steamer projection wise, I think like 5th or 4th or something like that. So I don't think it totally sank their chances or anything like that, but a lot of factors, a lot of things to play out still.
And I'll just read that full top 10. So Ohtani was the most at 106. Witt, Ellie, 100 apiece. Juan Soto goes for 74. Gunnar goes for 73. Julio Rodriguez for 70. Kyle Tucker for 67. Aaron Judge to Nate Handy for 64. Wyatt Langford for 63. and Jackson Churio rounding out the top 10, going for 62. Wyatt Langford was a part of my pre-auction plan. I did not get him, but I will reveal who I did get and sort of my thinking behind it here after a message from our sponsors. So this Dynasty auction that Nate and I are discussing on this week's episode would not have been possible without Fantrax hosting the site. It's absolutely the best place to play fantasy baseball, and especially any kind of fantasy baseball involving keepers, Dynasty. All my favorite Dynasty leagues are on Fantrax. I'm sure Nate's on Fantrax 10 hours a day, maybe more than that. So
too much.
Just the best place to play Dynasty. I've actually heard the Fantrax forums is maybe one of the best places to find a Dynasty league if you're looking for something like that. So sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/rotowire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/rotowire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost: $250K per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cash back on sports betting, DFS sweeps, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming, compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD. Okay, back with Nate Handy, and we are we broke down Nate's auction, the 10 players he left the startup draft with, or startup auction Dynasty with. The 10 players that I left with out of $200 to spend. I had Michael Harris at 47, was my most expensive player. I actually was the second lowest in the league for most expensive buy. Beck got Mookie Betts for 41. He had the cheapest, most expensive player. Michael Harris for 45 was the second cheapest, or 47, second most expensive player. And then I got Lawrence Butler for 27, William Contreras for 25, Manny Machado for 25, Ketel Marte for 25, Mark Vientos for 17, Blake Snell for 11, Mason Wynn for 10, Josh Hader for 4, and Sebastian Walcott for 2. So I definitely planned differently than Nate, but I put a lot of time into my planning as well. And I was very kind of focused on getting 7, maybe 8, maybe 9, maybe even 10 hitters I really, really liked. They didn't have to all be young. Definitely didn't want more than one prospect, but I just wanted to get as many hitters that I loved as I could. And initially, like I said, Wyatt Langford was supposed to be the most expensive player on the team, but I did not budget for what he went for, 63. Honestly, I had no idea what these guys were going to go for. I was sort of thinking maybe I'd get Wyatt Langford for 50. I probably would have gone up to around 50 on Harris, but I also budgeted a lot more on Lawrence Butler and Mark Vientos. So, over budget for some guys, under budget for some guys. What did you think about this crew of guys I grabbed here, Nate?
Well, one, I liked it in that I think you and I had two very different takes in the auction portion, so we weren't butting heads very much.
No, we weren't.
Yeah. You weren't one of my enemies yet, though. That was to come later.
Yeah, we became enemies in the snake draft portion.
Yeah, but I think the for your approach and what you wanted to do here, like I think a lot of plays that made a lot of sense. I think it, you know, uh, Lawrence Butler, $27. That could be real nice, I think. I'm curious though, and this is I don't really have much of an opinion. Um, Mark Vientos, not admittedly not a guy that I have paid a ton of attention to. I also spend a lot more time watching loser pitchers and A ball, but Mark Vientos, I was just curious. I was kind of surprised that he went for that much, but then after looking around a little bit, I was like, okay, maybe that makes a lot of sense actually. But I was just curious what your kind of your take on him was.
Yeah. So now this is an OBP league, so not the perfect format for Mark Vientos. I do think he's better in batting average leagues, probably.
Yeah,
But we'll see. Maybe he could end up sort of rounding into form as a more well-rounded guy there. But I think the age and the power, maybe not even going to be that dissimilar from like Pete Alonso, where it's just kind of 35 to 40 homer power, and just I'm buying, like, my idea with a lot of these guys was sort of trying to buy them at the beginning of their primes.
yeah.
So that's sort of like where I was sort of like trying to find the value, is like try to get a bunch of guys that would go for $5 to $10 more if we did it next year.
Yeah. And I guess what I said before wasn't totally true in that you weren't my enemy at all, because Marte and Machado were like I think the two bats that were left that still had like positive dollar value on my little chart. So I was like, oh, okay, I need one more. I've only gotten one. I wanted to get one of those, but I did not have enough money at that point to compete with you for those two.
Yeah,
But I think,
Machado was part of the plan going in. Like he's one of those guys that I've like loved Machado since he came into the league, and I think he's a guy that's going to have a really long prime. Like he just lives baseball. But
yeah,
a lot of kind of gut feel goes into that type of call. The Kettle Marte thing, like I also think he's going to age very well relative to these sort of older superstars.
yeah,
But Kettle Marte was not in the plans. I wanted Jordan Westberg and or Jackson Holiday. Westberg went for 26, Holiday went for 20, and it was kind of during the Westberg bidding when he gets up to like 24, 25, 26. Marte hadn't been nominated yet, and it just kind of got to a point where I was like, I think I can get Marte for about this price, and I just
yeah,
didn't want to pay 27 for Westberg when I thought Kettle Marte might go for like 22 or something like
yeah,
a day or two later. So yeah, that was a pivot, but Machado was definitely in the plans.
yeah. And I think Snell isn't like a personal favorite of mine, but I cannot deny his his dynasty fantasy utility. And
Yeah,
for $11 for Snell, that was I thought a pretty banger deal
I,
by your part
yeah,
there.
yeah. Like I said, I wasn't even like pitchers were just not really part of the plan. Like I figured I might end up with one or two, but I was just going to be playing the market
Yeah,
at that point, and so I got getting Snell and Hader for 15 total,
yeah,
pretty good. But that there were auction dynamics involved there, and the relievers just weren't going for more than like what did Mason Miller and Emmanuel Clase went for like 10 or something like that.
yeah. I think so.
So yeah,
Yeah,
that worked out fine, but it we'll see. Like you were saying, on average, it was like a little bit over 3 big league pitchers per team. So I
yeah,
had 2, so I was under on the average on pitchers, and then I was under on the average on prospects with Walcott.
yeah. But I mean, it's one player, uh, one prospect pick, by the rest of the owners, and you're like back on
Mhm.
track, right?
But I was happy with that. Like I wanted to be, I didn't want to have the most prospects. that was definitely
Yeah.
something I didn't want to have like after the auction. And
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't going to have the most pitchers, but that's what's so fun about like just this whole idea of a startup dynasty auction is you can just kind of, you can pretty much do like all like just almost anything you want. You couldn't do Otani and Witt as we found out, but you could have paired
Yeah.
almost any other combo of players at the top and just
Yeah.
endless dollar guys and $2 guys. So it was just
And
it was
and to me, that's the hardest part of a startup is how do you start in a fair manner? And this sort of thing was like you couldn't have anybody you wanted if you wanted to pay enough. So I thought definitely the way to go if you're going to do a startup dynasty league, in my opinion.
yeah, I'd recommend it for sure. We need someone to build someone to maybe buy couch managers and overhaul
Yeah,
it or something like that. But
Fantrax should.
they should sponsor Fantrax. Will get on that. Did you end up finding yourself like did like battle testing your feelings about players happen at all, or did you just kind of like the same guys at the end of the auction that you liked at the beginning of the auction?
Just in the auction portion.
Yeah, like because there were a couple players where I was sort of like I had them ranked, and they were actually kind of guys I was bidding on, like Vientos and Westberg. I ended up moving up on my dynasty rankings update just based on how much I realized I wanted them in this exercise.
Yeah, I don't know if like anybody really stood out to me in that way as far as just like was paid a lot for, not so much for, but I was really curious about the how far people would go with some of the prospects in the auction portion. Like I don't know if you noticed, but I was thrown for a minute there. I was throwing out relievers and prospects and guys that okay, if I get stuck with them for $0, fine, but I don't really want them. I don't really
Right.
want to pay for them. Um, so I was curious on that, but like Walcott for $2, I kind of would have thought he would have went for more than that. Uh, Jesus, Made went for what, $3, I think. I had no idea what he would go for. Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, I don't know.
I had like 8 or 9 or whatever it was budgeted for Walcott, and then he only went for 2. I think like DeVries went for 3, Mate went for 2 or 3. And it was just pitching prospects and proximity sort of seemed to be kind of because like Dylan
Yeah,
Cruz went for a ton.
yeah. There was
Sasaki obviously went for over 30.
yeah.
Payner,
If you count him as a prospect, yeah,
I do, but I
yeah,
mean I understand. Like my
yeah.
cutoff is 25. Like if you're under 25, I'll count you as a
Okay.
prospect. Um,
Yeah, there was I think 20 prospects taken in the auction part, if I'm not mistaken. 7 arms and 13 bats. Uh,
and that was more than I thought. I was talking with Bricks beforehand, and I think I predicted like 12 or 15 maybe would go, and he
yeah,
was thinking more than that. And yeah, it was because I was so focused on um like I want to be competitive in this league, and I just didn't. And I think I'm maybe lower on this overall class of prospects than a lot of the managers in this league. So I was hoping that people would kind of go crazy for prospects, and they did a little bit. But that made for a loaded reserve draft. Before we get to the, or did you want to comment at all on anything else to do with the auction before we get to the reserve portion?
no, it was a lot of fun, and auctions start to create some rivalries. I'm already very angry at half the league, so that sets a good tone to get into this thing, I think.
Who's like, you got like 1 or 2 managers that you're kind of particularly out
Well,
for blood?
uh Geoff Ponce.
Yeah.
We battled in the beginning on some of the auctions there. I was the one going after a Otani with him, and he beat me out on that one. Uh, he got some of the guys that I kind of wanted in the auction part, and then I don't know, maybe more in the later rounds, more reserve and minor league list portion of it. He was just plucking some guys that I was kind of interested in, but. And it's ironic, James. Right before I came on with you, we were just chatting a little bit, and he was saying how he and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of players, and I was like, "Whoa, man, I don't know. This last startup we just did, it sure seemed like we do." So yeah, so Geoff, but he knows some things
Yeah,
about
I feel like that
prospects in
almost
baseball.
that should almost up the beef. Just him kind of, like he's got like
Yeah,
a higher level of taste than you do with
yeah. I
with
know.
with
I don't know. Was he kind of twisting the knife a little bit there? I don't know. I'll have to.
it's a heated beef
Inquire.
right now. So 150 players are gone. Every team's got 10 players, so we moved to a reserve, or we moved to a snake draft to finish out. So everyone else will take 45 players in the snake draft for a total of 55 players. And Beck had the first pick since he had the most expensive player. He took Sandy Alcantara. I had the second pick. I took Helio Ramos. And then it went Christian Yelich, Luis Garcia, Jack Flaherty, Ian Happ, Randy Arozarena, Alex Bregman, and then Nate picking 9th in the snake draft took Ezekiel Tovar. Love that pick. What were your sort of your planning as it pertained to the snake draft? Because it sounds like you put a ton of thought and planning into your auction. So had you gotten your brain to sort of map out a little bit of how you thought the snake draft might go, or were you just sort of all reaction at this point?
I think I had a pretty good idea. I kind of figured the first, I don't know, a handful of rounds or so, there'd be some values. Maybe there were older players that would be good takes between 150 and 200 that could serve a lot of utility. Eric Cross, that was the first time I wanted Bregman bad in that spot because third base wasn't really liking what my alternative plans might be. So he got me there good. And anyone who I play with or chat with knows that I'm a big Tovar fan and have been for quite some time. But honestly, James, I had no plans of taking him in this format. It's the worst possible format for him. No batting average, OBP. But looking at my offense at this point, I needed some counting stats. I needed some home runs, needed some RBIs, some stolen bases, and I thought I went Tovar, and then I took who did I take after that? The catcher. Why am I
You
drawing
took
a blank? Oh, Seth.
yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. So I felt good about those two picks. Then give me some home runs, give me some RBIs. We feel good about Tovar, getting a lot of playing time and stuff like that. But obviously, he's not the perfect hitter at this juncture in his career, and I don't like the format. But it happened, and so I just went with it. Thought it was made sense.
I mean, I think it's great. I think he's just going to be such a counting stats machine.
I know, right? He's kind of interesting, isn't he? Like, I really like aggressive hitters for the most part until like their aggressiveness becomes dysfunctional. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but he's got horrible swing decisions, right? But yet, I mean, my man was second in the NL in extra base hits. Like, I don't know. I think you got to be careful sometimes too with hitters. Like, you usually can't gain something without losing something else. And I think I've seen it with some of the Rockies that that's my team. That's who I watch. Like, yeah, okay, cool. Montero cut down the swing and miss, but like all of his damage went away and he became useless. So I think sometimes you got to be a little careful with aggressive hitters like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mostly play batting average still because I play so much redraft, and so I mean, I have no problem with a guy that's got Ezekiel Tovar's skill set, especially with the Coors factor, and he's still just so young. He's entering his age 23 season. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, then you go Sal Perez, Kikuchi for you in the third. I'm not going to call it a sniping. Like these aren't really snipings when you've had so many opportunities to take somebody, but like Luis Rengifo, who you got in the fourth round, was someone who like there were even like iterations of the auction where I thought he would be a passable $0 guy.
Yeah.
So like I've been trying to tell people this offseason that I think Rengifo has kind of a sneaky high ceiling. It's like a weird thing to say about a guy that kind of came up with his sort of prospect profile, but like if you look at the power he got to in 2022 and 2023, you know, it's not crazy, but it's sort of if this guy was playing every day, it's kind of 20 homer power. And then last year, he's showing, you know, obviously the Angels are running like crazy. He's showing big time speed on the bases. Like, I think this could be a breakout year for Rengifo.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I want Welsh's ITL Army. I've kind of been loud about Rengifo for several years. Just like I think this guy could really be a good player in the bigs, and kind of waiting for it. Then I think I don't know. In some ways, kind of did it and broke out last year, and then he got hurt. But yeah, I agree. And another guy that I wasn't really totally planning on getting here, but I needed third base, and my options were dwindling. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm like a 85% dynasty shareholder of Luis Rengifo now. So I had no problems taking him there. I don't know, fit a need. I just stay healthy, man. Get like a full season's run and let's see what those, well, what is he? He's 27, 28.
Yeah,
I think he might
28.
be like my oldest infielder. So even though I went with like some crusty old vet pitchers, I still got like a young infield for whatever that's worth. But uh, yeah, I still like to think that we have not seen Renjifo's best major league season yet.
I think if he can just give us 130 games this year, Luis, and I think we got a career year on our hands.
Yeah, right.
So, like I said, I started off with Helio Ramos, who I think is a really exciting young outfielder, especially in terms of power, um, an everyday player. But since the only starting pitcher I got in the auction was Blake Snell, and since I wanted to compete this year, uh, I knew like the plan the whole time was to just pound kind of older pitchers in the snake draft portion right away. Um, so in the second round, I got Carlos Rodon. Third round, Zach Eflin. Fourth round, Robbie Ray. Uh, then I grabbed Kyle Bradish and Shane Bieber in the fifth and sixth round. Two pitchers I really like returning from injuries I'm not that concerned about. Um, what did you think about that idea of kind of going after sort of like older, less sexy but still
Yeah.
productive starting pitchers here?
This is when you started to like get under my skin a little bit because we had different approaches, and I think where you were starting to go some pitchers, I'm trying to fill some offense. Um, but there were pitchers on the board that I was like, you know what, I don't care. I'll load up even more on pitching because part of my thought there too, James, is like I don't really have much trouble trading pitching away in a dynasty league. Like, could never have enough. A lot of people have the idea, oh, I'll trade for some, I'll pick up the pop up guy. Like in my league, my goal is like to not make that easy for you if I'm playing in a league with you. I want to get to those prospects first, and I want to have excess pitching as much as that might be possible to trade away. So I saw some of the arms that you took in this range here. I was definitely like, all right, if they get back to me, I'm just gonna load up and take another one. But so maybe in a way you're kind of my friend too because you were helping me fill out my offense. But yeah, I liked a lot of those arms that you took there. I thought it was great values too, like guys that were at the top of my SP board while you were plucking them.
Yeah, and that was kind of a minor strategy that sort of evolved for me was going after pitchers I really liked that were coming back from surgeries where
Yeah.
it wasn't like like a second Tommy John or something like that, or a
Yeah.
scary shoulder type of thing. Like these are sort of basic, Tommy John or internal brace, first time. So I got Bradish, Bieber, and then later I grabbed Robert Stevenson. This is a saves and holds league, so
Yeah.
theoretically Robert Stevenson might be one of my 4 best relievers at the end of the season. And then I grabbed Tyler Wells, kind of out of sight, out of mind for Baltimore, but I think he could be one of their 5 best starters down the stretch this year once he gets back. So this is kind of I do usually preach risk avoidance to a large degree, especially in redraft. What did you think about this sort of idea of buying injured pitchers in Dynasty?
I love injured pitchers, James. I'm always looking at that demographic and trying to find those deals in both redraft. Not that I definitely play way more Dynasty, but and maybe sometimes like I'm still hanging on to Lance McCullers' dreams. Maybe that's
Oh,
getting dated in a few spots, but I think it's a great, especially if you're like rebuilding too and taking some crappy rosters like I do. Like that can be a great way, I think, to round out and get some decent pitching on the cheap. Uh, so
yeah, and
yeah,
I mean,
I
and I like, especially when it's sort of a dynasty or a draft and hold where you're talking about rostering like 50 plus players, like some of your pitchers are gonna get hurt. You're gonna need guys to be pitching for you come July, come
yep,
August. And so
yep,
it's almost sort of viewing the season in sort of segments. It's like, well, these are gonna be my pitchers for this segment. But I know like Shane Bieber is going to be big for me in the second half, or at least in
yeah,
theory, that's how it works.
yeah, exactly. And along with those same lines, I was like, all right, if I have to trade like a Wheeler or a Sale, hopefully they're pitching like they were last year at this point, and I got Painter who's doing things, and I took some more like AAA pitchers that I like a lot that maybe haven't debuted or just got a little bit of a taste to build some depth. So yeah, I think you got to think about pitching like that, like segments of the season, not oh, look at my February rotation. We're good. Like, yeah, no, you're not.
Well, and they're just it's human nature to um, discount something you can't use right away, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you're buying like a winter coat, it's going to be cheaper to buy it in July than in like December.
right,
Um, Whereas like when you're doing a draft, like nobody wants the pitcher they know they can't use until like May or June. So
right.
like I don't think it's priced in. There's obviously risk with these guys. Like in my article I wrote about it, like I'm assuming that kind of one of those 4 returning pitchers I bought, something happens and like I don't get anything from them this year, right? But
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so another guy you just broke my heart on, John Kenzie Noel. You took him in the 9th round.
It's funny,
Just
James. He wasn't even on any of my lists when that turn came up. Obviously Noel, like he was a old school B-sider. Like I'm, very aware, watched him a lot coming up, but like, I just didn't think it was the guy that I was going to go after. And then I started looking at my squad. I'm like, man, I need some home runs. Like, would like a young, power hitter of some sort. And I was just scrolling the Fantrax player list, and I was like, oh, Noel's still there. All right. So it just made sense, but it wasn't part of my plan. I wasn't planning on breaking your heart there. I'm sorry, James.
well, and to me, this is a perfect format for Noel because it's daily moves.
Yeah.
And so like I think you want Noel in your lineup whenever he's in the lineup. So you'll make that happen. And then if he can kind of hit his way into more playing time, he'll be doing all that in your lineup, and you don't have to worry about, he only played 2 or 3 days this week for me, because in theory you should have options to cycle in there.
Yeah.
And like to
Yeah.
me, it's just kind of it's like the bat speed and what he did with his second turnaround at AAA, like the level that he sort of mastered AAA before getting that call. He had a strikeout rate below 15%, I think, over his like 5 weeks or so before getting that call.
Yeah.
I know he's got the reputation of being like a big strikeout guy, and he certainly will strike out a decent amount, but I think he fixed the issue at AAA as an age appropriate player, and he's flashed such a high. It's kind of like almost like you're dreaming on like a Marcelo Zuna type of player. So
there's no doubt that the power is freakish, and he is still. I mean, I think 2021, I had him as like one of my B-side picks, and like, but feels like he's been around forever, but he's still so young. And yeah, obviously the strikeouts are the big concern, but I don't think watching him and his technique and his decisions that it's like I don't think it's hopeless that it can't get better. Yeah, I don't know.
and
There's
his
power hitters, man. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes with a lot of them, and you're not gonna know until they get to the bigs.
And he's got just special bat speed that
Yeah,
like he might have like an earlier prime, like it might be one of those things where once he loses a little bit of bat speed, he falls off. But yeah, he's great. Kind of the opposite of John Kenzie Noel, Caleb Durbin.
yeah.
I mean, you could probably fit like 3 Caleb Durbins in John Kenzie Noel. But
right?
yeah, Durbin, this one was the Noel one. The Rengifo one, I kind of knew I wasn't getting him because I had to get pitching. The Noel one, I was sort of like kicking myself after the fact. The Durbin one was a stone cold snipe job in the 15th round. So what do you think? What do you see as in store for Caleb Durbin here in 2025?
I mean, what I'm hoping to see is like darn near everyday run this year with a high OBP and a good amount of stolen bags. This stretch right here, and I feel like was the pivotal point for me and like the key to my whole approach. And a player like Durbin, right? He hasn't debuted yet, so there's some different utility there. When I start to get to the end of my offensive lineup, it's not full yet. I start thinking about my bench just as much, and those like minor leaguers, guys that I can put on the minor league list for a minute, just as much, if not more, than how I'm going to fill out the rest of that starting lineup. Right? The Durbin was very much at the high end of my list there, thinking that I wanted to be aggressive and get him before anybody else did. I didn't know when to pull the trigger on that. Obviously, I think I picked a good time because he wasn't going to last much longer, right?
No, he wasn't. And speed was I knew speed was my weakness. Basically, the whole time. And I'd kind of, had Durbin sort of I thought I had him in my back pocket, like, well, I'll just grab Durbin. There's no way anyone's going to grab Durbin before me, and I'll get his 30 to 40 steals.
We know James on our podcast B-side prospect B-side show. My co-host, the Rook Matt, he's been touting Durbin since like 2023 before the AFL thing, and I was always like, this short guy, like whatever. But he turned me into a big fan just watching him the last 2 seasons over the minor leagues. Never mind the AFL stuff. So I was like, maybe I'm too aggressive. I don't know, but we've just been fans of him as long.
I just got to say, like, an apology though to like the people that were there from day one, because I'm like a late the party. Like I'm into Caleb Durbin after he's already gone on like Saturday Night Live and stuff. You know, like I'm not a real fan. Like
Oh no, there's lots of
I'm
room on the Durbin train, and a lot of
um,
people who don't like the Short Kings either. And poor guy,
well,
but
to me, it was just all about like I just thought there was zero chance the Yankees were ever actually going to play him.
Yeah,
And so like I
yeah,
factor in like playing time and opportunity a lot to my rankings, and I definitely stand by that. I don't think the Yankees were ever going to play him, but
yeah,
probably should have had him a little higher under the thought that a team might come
yeah,
grab him. But you know,
yeah.
the Brewers are one of the teams that like it's just a perfect home for him, right? Because he's
Right, that's kind of what I was
your
thinking.
type of
Yeah,
guy. Like, but a lot of teams wouldn't take a guy like this in a trade and like give him the playing time you and I think they're going to give him.
yeah, or at least hoping. But yeah, that this little stretch here, I will say, was kind of like was pretty planned, or I hoped for, and I got a string of hitters that I was hoping to get. And when I went Nolan Jones, Tyler Soderstrom, Garrett Mitchell, Noel, like you mentioned, and Jose Miranda. Now, obviously, lots of question marks with those players, right? But some players that I've liked for a minute. I like the skill set. I liked how they sort of complement each other, and I'm just hoping and thinking that we have not seen the best from those guys. And if I can get like 2 or 3 of those guys to really establish themselves as a fine fantasy stud or near stud, I think my team's going to be in good shape.
Yeah, like if you you go Nolan Jones, Soderstrom, Garrett Mitchell, Noel, Miranda. Like if you just go sort of 3 for 5 there, you're in really good
Yeah,
shape.
I think I'll feel much better about my offense and kind of kicking some of the offense down the road a little.
So I'm right there with you on Soderstrom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's probably the best sort of cheaper first base buy this offseason to me. Nolan Jones, it's kind of, you know, how much do you trust him? Obviously, you think
It's
he's
just,
closer to the 2023 version of himself. So
I mean,
what do
I
these
don't
guys?
know. I don't know if I think or if it's more hope. I think James, I think it's all about his back. I think
Oh
his
yeah,
back was a huge deal last year, and I mean I think if he's healthy or nearly as healthy as he was a couple years ago, then I think you're going to have a pretty fine fantasy player.
yeah, and it's I didn't mean to phrase it that way. Where it's like someone was asking me about like, oh, so you're a believer in like Sean Burke's command. It's not so much that it's like I believe in this about X player. It's sort of like, well, what are the range of outcomes here? Like, what are the chances? So,
Yeah,
like, it's like Nolan Jones, you know, you're kind of weighing. It's not like you're saying he's going to do this. It's kind of like, well, at this point, like, I think there's a decent chance he could do this. So,
yeah, and if you think about like that guy is just so tooled out and such a freak. Like I don't know, you get deep enough in some drafts, especially like some prospect drafts, and I'm just like, I'll just take some guy who's got a freak ability and just see how it goes, you know?
and the fact that you have like the injury to point to, like, that's messing with his projections a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah. Well, he's another interesting one with them, James, to me, because I think they did tone down some of his aggressiveness. Like when he was really good, he was just destroying first pitches, right? And then he stopped swinging at those. And yeah, I think his on base percentage spiked up or whatever, but he was doing a lot less damage being more passive. So I don't know, whatever that's worth.
And he's Nolan Jones, who we're discussing here. Yeah, I mean, he's like a $3 player in high stakes auctions right now. He's going, um, let's see, he's going around pick 240 in draft and holds. What do you think about this? Going right next to each other, or Jesus Sanchez versus Nolan Jones? Who you got?
Ooh, I mean, I know you've
Because
been
I
a
got
big
Sanchez in our in this draft actually. So where did I take
yeah,
him?
you've been a big Sanchez guy for a minute now, haven't you,
Oh yeah,
James?
so you took Jones 5 rounds ahead of where I got Sanchez. So you're obviously Jones over Sanchez. I
I
am. I
mean,
have long-standing Sanchez.
I feel better about Sanchez's like PA projection. Uh,
Right.
Nervous about Jones, but I think overall, skill set,
That's
if we're healthy and it goes well, I like Jones more.
yeah, and good point. Like OBP Jones obviously should go Sanchez. So then you also grabbed the last guy I wanted to commend you for sniping me on is Seth Halverson of the Rockies. Kind of
Throws the baseball very hard.
he's kind of like the pitcher version of Durbin for me, where I wasn't in on the ground floor, but the longer the off season lingers, the more I'm pushing my way to the front of the bandwagon.
Well, Halverson, he I mean, obviously he had the velo, big stuff, but like up until maybe the back half of this last minor league run for him, like the walks were way too much for me. Like I was like, oh, here we go again, just another. But he really cleaned that up, I think, quite a bit. So I want to say that Halverson like has some new developments in his whole story here, and got me a lot more interested. Like he was not the most interesting. Like I like Zach Agnos more in the Rockies system
Mm-hmm.
up until this maybe hopefully new version of Halverson here. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I figured I had punted. I don't think I had taken a reliever at all up until this point, and I had really kind of
Right.
punted all that down the road. And in the end, I think I was happy with like the arm talent that I got, and who knows. But if I leave a startup dynasty draft, like not knowing what my relief pitching is going to be, I can live with that. I think I can figure that out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I noticed that actually now that you mentioned that you were waiting, and it didn't surprise me, right? Because um, like you should be able to find relievers, right? And I
You'd
don't
hope.
have I know like how competitive players in this league are, and
Yeah.
how accomplished they are at winning these types of leagues with the relievers and the shuttling them.
Sure.
So I was more interested in allocating some resources towards relievers with
Yeah.
Hader, Griffin Jacks, Trevor McGill, who might be another IL guy for me. We'll see what happens with that injury, but
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. There were times that I wanted to pop a reliever, but they just got taken, and I couldn't pass on my other idea.
so you mentioned those hitters that you have been liking for a while that you were able to get. Were there before we go, do you want to like leave us with a few of sort of your late round guys here that you maybe are kind of out in front on, or maybe want to kind of pump up that don't get a ton of love?
Well, I was I didn't go real prospect heavy, right? I think I took Painter in the auction, and then Durbin was, my next prospect that picked 369 or whatever. Um, I popped a few that I just thought the value was too good at. But then I just kind of waited till the end, and I just went with some young bats that I am most anxious to see out the gates in 2025. A lot of them tend to be, I don't know. I've been on like a switch hitter kick lately, James. I don't know what it is. Watching some young switch hitters and just getting like really into a few of them. So that probably played into some of it here too. But this is a league where you can pick up prospects, right? So I don't necessarily need guys that I need to be married to at the end of my list, right? But and these are some guys that I think we've talked about on our podcast some. But who'd I pop? I like JD Dix a lot, Whitefish Bay, right, James?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Pretty stroke from both sides of the plate. Uh, Lisbel Diaz is a guy that I really like a lot, like kind of in the same, uh, I don't know, ilk of, now he's right-handed, but of like a Soderstrom, someone who I think just has like a really calm, easy, natural power stroke, who really turned it on at the second half of A ball as an 18-year-old. Logan Wagner. I don't, James, are you a fan of Logan Wagner? Have you been paying much attention to him? Not that there's much to see. I think he's had what 130 ABs since being drafted in 2022. But I am like, just from the look of this guy and his technique at the plate and what he could potentially be, I'm just like so in on Logan Wagner.
Okay, well, yeah, I think people have been trying to get me to rank him.
Oh, really?
Which I haven't yet.
Well, I don't blame you. I mean, the dude hasn't played. He can't stay on the field for more than a month at a time. And I don't even know, minor league injuries. We don't get a lot of information on that sort of thing. So I don't know what his whole story is, but that dude can stroke it, man.
20-year-old, about to going to turn 21 in March. Switch hitter at single A last year. Slash 246, 405, 484, 139 WRC plus, 6 homers in 38 games. Said Logan Wagner. There's a deep cut, a B-side.
Yeah, he's a young bat that I like quite a bit. And I really like Devin Soltabon. I seem to get him as like my last Devy pick and all these, first year players / minor league supplemental, whatever. Like he's always like the last prospect on my list, but I think there's a relatively decent shot of him being an everyday player
I like him
someday.
I
So
think he's
those
he's like
oh, sorry.
he's a fantasy guy. Saltabon's to me he's like a guy that's just sort of like he's almost better for fantasy than reality a little bit, just because I think he could be like over 15 homers, over 15 steals, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was what for his first pro season in the FSL. He almost went 2020, and that was with him. Like, really, I watched a good bit of that of Clearwater in the beginning of the year, and like he was a bit, I think, overmatched in the beginning. Like there was a learning curve there, and I think he like just kind of really turned it on. But yeah, an interesting guy. And like I said, I just took a lot of teenage bats that I'll probably end up dropping them after the first week of minor league starts, and we find out who this year's like Jonah Tong and George Klassen are in that first week. But anywho, they're on my team for now.
Awesome, Nate. Well, why don't you let people know where they can follow you and keep up with who your favorite prospects that no one's ever heard of are?
Right on. So do a podcast called the Prospect B-Sides. I do that with my friend Matt, the rookie, who knows some things about ball. He played at Washington State and he was a hitter. I think he played in Australia a little bit, played in some summer leagues, but he's good to talk to about hitting. And, he likes to get in the mud and watch all these like 0 to 2% rostered guys. And we just I sit in my garage and he sits in his office and we just kind of talk about these guys and wonder about any future dynasty utility. Sometimes we come across some guys that turns into something. Probably most of the time, and most of the guys we talk to don't, but we have fun doing that. And you can follow me on Twitter at Pitching Specs. I'm also got an account on Blue Sky at Muddy Looks. I don't venture over there too much, but yeah, and I hang out in Chris Clegg's Dynasty Dugout and chat there, and occasionally drop some articles. But I haven't written anything in a minute. But yeah, that's where I am, I guess.
Awesome, man. Well, this was a lot of fun, and I look forward to. I think we were in a dynasty league before that folded. I think maybe.
Were we? I don't know. I was thinking that this might be the first league that we've played together in. James.
Maybe okay. Maybe it is.
There might have been one of those like 5-year things that like Prospect Live did or something like that we might have done. No, but
I was thinking of a different one. But if you weren't, then I think it is our first. So yeah, that's gonna be fun. And
yeah, I look forward to seeing how this all plays out and playing with you guys, and just happy to be invited.
Well, you were bringing the best banter, I thought, in the Discord chat, which I think it's underrated to have good banter in a dynasty league, and I think Nate's one of those guys that you want in there, stirring it up, but keeping it tasteful and
yeah, it's fun, right?
So
We'll
yeah.
bust some chops, but we play these games for fun, right? That's what it's supposed to be. So
Well, yeah, it's gonna be a blast, and again, really appreciate you taking the time, and I'll still try to take you up on discing out in Colorado sometime. But
yeah, you should. There's some good courses not far from my house.
I know I got to get out there. Need need Innova to sponsor me and sponsor the pod. Get me out there.
Yeah, let's get on that, guys. Come on.
All right, this has been the FSWA nominated RotoWire Prospect Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax.
Thanks.